Hello and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk. Today we have a very special guest with us, Aruni Kashyap. Aruni teaches at the University of Georgia in the Department of English, and he's also a very popular writer from Assam, and he's going places. We are very grateful to have Aruni with us today. Aruni, more pratham prashna to very simple. When we are growing up in the late 80s and 90s in Assam, lot of us lived under the shadow of insurgency, right? The Bodo insurgency, the Alpha, and our lives were sort of defined by this while we were growing up. And yet in the Indian imagination, larger Indian imagination, when we picked up the newspapers, they didn't seem to leave a dent. It didn't seem to matter so much. Do you think that we have any space in the Indian imagination right now?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question and a very, very interesting question. First of all, I'm very excited to be here. So thank you so much for inviting me here. It's a pleasure. When I was writing in 2004, 2005, when I started writing and trying to publish, I used to go for readings. People knew about Alpha in Assam, and then people knew about Indira Goswami. So these two things in Delhi people knew about. But in general, there was absolute sort of lack of information about what exactly was going on. I realized that the realities of many of my friends who grew up in so-called mainland India, those friends had a far more calmer reality. A headline for them was the cost of onion, the high cost of onion or high cost of electricity bills. But the headline for them was 10 people gunned down, entire village being sort of attacked or burned by counterinsurgency operation leaves, multiple family dead, secret killings of Assam, whole families being blown up by a bomb, daily news of deaths, disappearances and despair was our reality. So I was very startled to find that. So I think during those times there was absolute lack of information. Whatever big headlines were there, one or two, when something very major happened here. I do think because of the proliferation of media and proliferation of electronic media and a large body of students from Northeast India studying there, who have settled there also as a kind of an internal migrant or diaspora. I think things are changing now. There is more representation about it probably, there is more discussion about it, but I do think there's a lot to go. Also, I think at that point of these days, whatever story about Assam that goes out of here is a very simplistic story about Assam that is easily digestible for the small number of people who are interested in Assam politics. That has to fit into existing narratives of that are full of binaries. But I think the biggest common enemy for people in Northeast is actually a very authoritarian state, and I don't say it's the current state. I think it's a state since 1947, and they have not been fair to us. And as a result of that, I think whatever little representation is there, it's good, but I think I have stopped caring about it right now. I used to care about it, I used to worry about it, and I also think that hankering for that is not useful. We really have to take ownership of our own knowledge, our own stories, and start supporting each other as writers, storytellers, poets, journalists, artists, and filmmakers. So the stories from here, more cultural production from here can get out of Assam and reach. That is when I think many of the misconceptions, a lot of the lack of knowledge from a place like ours will be countered. But we cannot also, I want to say this and end this, that we cannot also work with the awareness that we are writing to an absence. We can, because that is going to affect our art production and shape our art in a very different way. We'll be trying to inform, but we should be foregrounding is actually human stories as much as possible for a wider appeal, not just within India, but also across the world.
Absolutely, and I love the fact that you said that we no longer care. Many of us don't, and vis-a-vis what is going on in Manipur is that we have seen the response of the Indian state, careless to say the least, and yet we have cinema and documentary filmmakers coming out of Manipur that is projecting this reality in a way that has not been done before. For instance, this film called Boom, right? I just it's just, I think, one of the ways that you can show Manipur with all its diversity and all of its pain as well. And I love the fact that you said that cultural production should be our way of saying our thing, and it makes so much sense to me. And if I can connect it to a story of yours called Before the Bullet, where you had Digonto. Digonto is an Assamese student who's studying at America, and he comes back from America with the knowledge that you have human rights and you have human dignity, and he's on this bicycle. I think he stops at an army camp, and where they expect him to get down, and he doesn't, and that's the only reason that he was shot.
Yeah.
So for a lot of us, I don't think we were surprised, and it felt faintly familiar as well. But I just want to ask you about your readers who are not from here and who are not perhaps familiar with this reality that we live. What was their response to stories like this? And have you had any interesting responses that you want to talk to us about?
Yeah, their response was of disbelief. The Indian response is of disbelief because they don't want to accept that the Indian army can do that. In fact, the story was based on many reports that we read, and I also, the two kinds of there are different kinds of consequences when you repress a community. One of the consequences is actually out-migration. So people have left Assam and wider regions here or the states here to find greener pastures in other parts of the country. But they have also formed a steadily growing small diaspora in the United States. And we see those people writing about these stories or telling those stories. So I actually heard a story like this from one of my friend who grew up in rural Assam, and he studied in the US eventually. He got a scholarship, and he used to tell me about these stories, and that really astonished me because I had read about these things, but I had never really met anybody who would tell such a story. So first of all, in India, the story is often met with disbelief, but I think in the last 10 years or so, since I've written that book and since I've published that story, a lot of books have been written about the vast human rights violation that has happened in Northeast, happened in Assam, how the counterinsurgency operations actually disregarded human life, and there was absolutely no care about how common people suffered as a result of it in the early 90s. Parakumar Das also did a lot of work in this regard. So as a result of that, people now they don't treat me with that similar kind of disbelief. But in the West, where I live now, where I'm a South Asian writer, people are used to a certain kind of fiction which I think is full of peacocks, mangoes, snakes, Taj Mahal. A certain kind of novel is Indian novel is commercial Indian idea is popularized. So Bollywood and biryani novels. So people who have grown up with a staple, that kind of novel, to read something coming out of Assam which is gritty and subversive in nature and also political in its streak, in its questioning, they find it very surprising. And they actually won't say they don't believe it, but they have a lot of questions. Why didn't we hear about this? Why did we only hear about immigration anxieties? How do people are living there? So they have a lot of questions. But it also comes from a space that the earlier ecosystem of literature did not actually critique the state violence that was going on in the margins of India. And that is something basically I always write about.
Can I just add a small bit? I think there's also, of course, there's state violence, but some of us can see that there's public consensus which is not against the violence. I won't say that they're in support, but they're definitely not against the violence. And this kind of public consensus that is growing, do you see that as a problem?
Of course, it is a big, huge problem. I think the consensus is grown by taking over the media houses, by establishment forces across the country. So what we need actually more and more is getting out of legacy media, but more and more we need is alternative media, alternative ways of making this news available to common people. Because most people, they really know people may not have an intellectual response to day-to-day politics in the country, but the common people, the electorate of India, is extremely volatile simply because they know what is going on. We know what tires them. We know what they want. They want to talk about economics. They want to talk about living comfortably. They don't want to be driving across a bridge and suddenly collapse and fall into a river, which is happening now in many places in the country. They don't want to go to the airport and get drowned because the roads are bad. So these are the things that people care about. So we have to resist it by telling our stories and raising our voices as much as possible. And that may not be, we have to be shape shifters, I think. So it has to be done in a variety of ways, what is possible for people. I'm not going to prescribe that this is exactly how you should raise your voice, because that's just will be me in a soapbox from a pedestal telling people this is how you should do it. I don't think we should tell people how to do it, but we should definitely keep it in mind. We have to keep critical mind. We have to be proud anti-nationals again, as I said.
The immigrant Assamese experience is so refreshing for a lot of us in your stories, because we're accustomed to reading Jhumpa Lahiri, right? But for me, what was interesting in the story Minnesota Nice, is that we finally turn Indian, because there's this quote, actually we have guests coming in a few hours, so we need to get rid of the Indian smell. So that really cracked us up, because it was quite ironic, like if we have lived in Delhi, then it is our Akhuni and our Hukanmas which had done this to us.
Yeah.
And now we go to America and suddenly we are the Indian smell. So, how interesting this was.
Oh, it was not. It was rather dispiriting when people and actually many Indians used to advise me, like keep your coats and clothes, everything locked up when you cook, because if you cook and the smell goes inside there of ginger garlic paste or jeera powder, dhania powder, so they will get inside the creases of it, and then you will wear it and go to a meeting and everybody will run away from you.
Oh.
But actually that didn't really happen, actually, but many Indians, my senior people, they actually advised me that don't do that, this is what you should be doing. But it is true also that people because their food habits are different, they're very highly sensitive to, a lot of people are highly sensitive to that. By sensitive I mean they get it very quickly, but most people I have met, they're very excited about Indian food, by the way. But in this story, Himjyoti's character, obviously I used that experience which I heard from many people. I mean, Jhumpa Lahiri is an excellent writer and a very beautiful prose stylist, and I read her when I was in college and an undergraduate. But when I moved to US, I wanted to see people like myself in literature, and that was a initial reason I actually started inserting myself in Asian American literature, so to speak. But over the years, I have realized that another reason I really wanted to see myself was simply because not just Jhumpa Lahiri, but actually a lot of Indian English writers were writing fiction that was not ever addressed to me. The narrator was always talking to somebody else who was not Indian. Even if you read many writers who will actually explain you so many things, nitty-gritties about Indian realities, that you would wonder, if they were talking to me, they wouldn't need to do this. So that is something that bothered me a lot, both as a writer, as an artist, and as a literature student as well. And that was further sort of buoyed by this really robust debate about who is the Indian English writer writing for. And I really wanted to not be part of any of these concerns and debates and totally be sort of washed away and consumed by these debates. I wanted to write in English. I wrote already in Assamese for a very long time, and I wanted to be an Assamese writer, write with an Assamese lens, irrespective of the language that I wrote in. And that is why actually I started writing these kind of stories.
In your latest collection of short stories, The Way You Want to Be Loved, the title story, beautiful and heartbreaking story about Utpal and his journey to find love. We are made aware of the everyday unfairness and even violence that surrounds the life of a queer person in India. And as Utpal's mother struggles to live in a city hospital in Delhi, you have Utpal and his partner Sunil in a park where they are finding a moment of peace, and there's a kiss happening, and then the police comes in and drags them to the police station. So there are also many such instances of violence strewn across the story, and so this is a very powerful, a very long story, very powerful and very long. And of course that's the core of the story. But what I also loved about this story is the food and care. Utpal cooking for Rudra, and then Tara cooking for Utpal, and then finally Sunil making that perfectly brewed cup for Utpal. So I do want to ask you the queerness question here. I want to ask about the food and care and love against this.
I think those are lovely observations. Well, first of all, I love food, so I have to bring in food in my stories. I think food really creates community. When we have food together, we talk, we bond, and bonds are so important for human beings to thrive. So food is a community builder, friendship builder, family builder. And for queer people, family is so important. Family that queer people have to construct on their own. So food, that's why comes in repeatedly in order to. And I think I like talking about my favorite food and making my characters eat their favorite food.
Yes,
so at a very basic level,
I love that.
So at a very basic level, all that is also happening. I think most of the food I mentioned in my novels are food that I like to eat. I would never ask anybody to have, I don't know, squash probably. I don't like squash.
No, but we can also, the reader can sense that you know how to cook well, because the mixing and matching is quite nice. Do you cook a lot, Aruni?
I do. I have to, because
because you live in America, as you
America, So I also I have lived as a diasporic student for most of my life. So the situations compelled me to cook a lot. So I do like to cook, and for my friends and for myself.
Absolutely, I hope I'm a friend.
Yes, you're most invited.
Thank you. And I believe Aruni right now is living out of the Tiliguri.
Yes.
And then you hop on to America, as you say in one of your stories. So how has this, I don't know, I'll end with this question. So how has this living been, and what can we expect from you in the next year or a couple of years? Is there anything else coming out that you want to pitch today?
Yeah, sure. My book, How to Date a Fanatic, will be published by Fourth Estate next summer. And it is coming in the US from the publisher called Harper Vaya, and the Indian imprint Fourth Estate, which is an imprint of HarperCollins, will publish it. It's a novel about a young professor living in Delhi, navigating love and romance and desire, and he has a group of friends who really care about him. While all of this is happening, different kind of protest marches are happening, political instability is happening, until it affects all of them in very major ways. So that's the rough outline of the story, but it's primarily a love story. I last year finished writing a novel called My Brother and the Fortune Tellers. It is a novel I wrote while I was at Harvard University as a Radcliffe fellow, and that is a book that I'm revising, giving it shape. The rough, messy draft is there. I'm giving it shape. While I was at Harvard, I also discovered the archives of a family called the Tuttle family. They actually lived in Guwahati from 1903 to 1939 approximately, and they are American Baptist missionaries. But what they did was a lot of social work in Assam, and I found their letters and their papers, and it was supremely interesting to actually go through them, because it gave me a glimpse of old Guwahati, old Assam, because they traveled a lot as well, and at the same time the dramatic events that are happening in their lives. So I read all of those papers, made copies wherever I could, and it was like reading a epistolary novel, a slow one, of course. So I hope to write a book about it also, probably in Assamese first, before writing another book about it in English.
Oh wow, I love the fact that you are a bilingual writer. There are not many around anymore, and rare breed, and I hope you continue to enchant us all with your stories about, love, food, intimacy, and more.
Yeah, and the way you want to be loved.
Of course, the way you want to be loved. Love the heading, and I wish I had a cover of the book. We don't, but I'll try and place it. Yeah. So thank you,
Thank
Aruni.
you. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.